Welcome back, Astro listeners, to Star Lady Soul Reader Network. This is your host, Media Monk. And as usual, we have our shining star of the zodiac, Star Lady. Hi, Star Lady.
Hello, Media Monk.
And most of us recall Star Lady is Kim Marie, the managing director for our network. EAN continues to provide a wonderful evolutionary astrology course for self-motivated students wanting to learn more about EA. She studied that EA paradigm for going on 40 years now, and we still collectively guide hundreds and hundreds of students across the planet through that EA course. So if you're interested, just go to www.evolutionaryastrology.net, find the drop-down menu there to courses, and you can also take a look at our optional certification program. So we've accumulated probably a dozen, 15 years of streaming videos that you'll be able to get access to immediately upon purchase. Always call 1-605-348-5111 to schedule your personal time with Star Lady. And on this new moon in late Scorpio, we're heading into some Sagittarius energy. I'll just turn it over to you, honey.
Thank you, Media Monk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new moon of late Scorpio, as Media Monk said. We are recording this the day before the new moon, which will be November 20th at 28 degrees Scorpio. And three things about this new moon. Number one, that new moon is in a grand trine with Jupiter retrograde, about 25 Cancer, and Saturn retrograde, 25 Pisces, Neptune retrograde, 29 Pisces. So we have a grand trine in water, which is the passive polarity. The water and earth signs are passive. Fire and air signs are active. So that passive energy is attracting energy, and it's emotionally attracting energy. When we have a grand trine in water, it can be a time period to really get in touch, of course, with our emotional body. But things can reveal themselves on emotional levels and make sense for us. There can be major emotional shifts. And the new moon at late Scorpio, it lends itself to the deep emotional psychology coming to the surface for us. And what adds on to that is just a few hours after the new moon on November 20th, Mercury retrograde goes back over Sun and Moon. On the new moon, Mercury is 28.5 degrees Scorpio, same degree. And so that interior conjunction of Mercury retrograde, it's the aha moment. It's the highlight, the insights of Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And so again, here is deep psychological insights popping up to the surface all over the place. On emotional levels, Scorpio, on mental levels, Mercury retrograde. The talk around town in astrology is because the passive polarity loosely relates to feminine energy, active polarity relates to masculine energy. Grand trine in water, passive polarity, there's a lot of feminine issues in the news, and probably the biggest one is that after months of denial and calling it a hoax, both chambers of the U.S. Congress passed the Epstein Transparency Act, releasing the files about this pedophile. And, of course, Donald Trump has been trying to keep that all secret. It is an emotional awareness of how women have been victimized. However, I will say grand trines, being what they are, Donald Trump's Justice Department, which operates on orders from him, what they're going to release is probably going to be a bunch of BS, a bunch of retracted files that give nothing. Or, if they do this, all the Democrat names are not redacted. All the Republican names are. And if they are dumb enough to do that, it will bring the storm back even more. So stay tuned. We will see what gets revealed as time goes by, but I expect excuse making, and I expect them to do, excuse me, listeners, a half-assed job. However, the fact that these female victims have stood up to powerful men again, and did not give up. This was a moment of emotional ahas for half of the citizens in this country. Stay tuned again. We'll see what comes along. You, on a personal level, what are you recognizing for yourself emotionally? Where is your deep emotional psychology bringing you some ahas and emotional recognitions and understandings? The third thing that's happening on November 20th, this is an aspect, second time out of 5, Uranus waxing sextile Neptune. This is an aspect that we're in the midst of recognizing all the way through the month of November, even into December. The thing about these, there will be 5 Uranus waxing sextiles to Neptune, 2025 through 2027. This is the only one that takes place with Uranus retrograde back into Taurus, 29 degrees, Neptune retrograde back into Pisces, 29 degrees. The other 4 sextiles take place in Gemini, Aries. And so this waxing sextile, Jeffrey Green would always teach that waxing sextiles, the beginning half of that circle, half a trine, they're very important choice points, meaning choices made at the waxing sextile between those 2 planets will have an effect throughout their relationship in the rest of their cycle together, the rest of the circle. Well, we are looking at the last time Uranus-Neptune made conjunctions. There were 3 of them in 1993 between 18 to 20 degrees Capricorn. 18 to 20 degrees Capricorn, 3 of them in 1993. Their conjunctions in the 1820s were loosely called the Industrial Revolution. The conjunctions in the 1990s are being loosely called the Technological Revolution. Look at how technology, ruled by Uranus, Capricorn, physically, the imagination and inspiration with Neptune. Look at how technology has transformed our lives since 1993. So now they're at these waxing sextiles, along with Uranus getting ready to make waxing trines to Pluto, Neptune getting ready to make waxing sextiles to Pluto throughout the rest of this decade. And we have the AI, or artificial intelligence, revolution taking place. Well, we have a bubble burst because the U.S. AI development is totally based upon profitability. And there are others out there, for instance, China, as well as other countries that are taking this technology and putting it out there open source or for free. In other words, sorry, I'll take a breath. Won't go into a lot of details on it, but are we basically going to take AI for the profitability of a few at the expense of the masses? Or is AI going to open up opportunities for the masses and have a redistribution of equilibrium? Stay tuned. That's just one of the themes in these Uranus waxing sextiles to Neptune. Bringing it back down to the more immediacy of this second one out of 5 on this new moon, combined with Mercury retrograde, conjunct the Sun, again, late Scorpio, the new moon grand trine in late Scorpio, and the fact that the sextile, this sextile is in that passive polarity again, there's an internalization of recognizing where we're at, where we're going. There is a very strong feeling component to this. How am I surviving Uranus retrograde Taurus for the last few months, for the next 80 years? How am I surviving? How are my opportunities playing out for me? Neptune retrograde for the last few months in Pisces for the next 160-some years. So we can have a very strong, again, comprehensive moment going on. And it can be shifting a lot of collective understandings. And then we'll go on to the rest of these waxing sextiles and see the insights and opportunities exploding. So look at where you have Uranus retrograde, last degree Taurus in your chart. Where do you have Neptune retrograde, last degree of Pisces in your chart? How are you personally operating in this universe right now? That's going to be the grounding of the emotional ahas that are going on for you. Now, as these planets have been moving through Scorpio, they have been making their oppositions to Uranus. In other words, again, the inner planets in Scorpio are making their oppositions to Uranus in Taurus. And Mercury makes 3 of them with the retrograde cycle. The first one before it went retrograde was at 0.5 Sag Gemini. The next 2 Mercury retrograde oppositions to Uranus, there's one taking place today, November 19th, the day before the new moon. Here again, we're Scorpio Taurus. Mars made an opposition in Sag Gemini. Uranus is retrograded back into Taurus. And now Sun and Venus and 2 more Mercury oppositions to Uranus will take place. And they'll all be those last degrees of Scorpio Taurus. Again, adding to this picture, I'm just calling it deep psychological awakenings. In other words, we can have the powers that be saying everything is great in the economy all they want, and yet people understand with their own pocketbooks exactly what is taking place. I saw the price of chocolate kisses in the grocery store a couple of days ago, and I went, holy moly. I remember buying these bags of Hershey's Kisses years past, and I don't know what the bags were. Let's say, they were $3. Now it was $10. So there's, again, deep understandings and awareness that can come through. Make your effort to ask what it is that you would like to know. And get in touch with where your value systems are. This Mercury retrograde starts with a conjunction of Mercury to Venus, and it ends with the next Mercury retrograde cycle and the third conjunction to Venus. We have 3 Mercury-Venus conjunctions over this winter. Sometimes we have one, and then it goes for a while. Sometimes we have 3 of them. Just depends on their retrograde cycles. And this first Mercury retrograde conjunction to Venus is November 24th at 23 degrees Scorpio. So we're having deep reviews of our value systems. How are they changing for you? And this can obviously be affecting intimate relationships for those who are in intimate relationships, because Scorpio is traditionally the marriage archetype. It's also the divorce archetype. So we could have the relationship splits going on. We could have relationships really looking at whatever the issues are and making choices on how they're going to metamorphose, rebirth, Scorpio words, their intimate relationship. This could be a time period for those deep, deep conversations, being as honest as possible with each other. Sun moves into Sagittarius November 21st. My EA mantra, I understand the relativity of truth with others. I understand, Sagittarius, the relativity of truth, Gemini, with others. Venus is going to go into Sagittarius November 30th through December 24th. It's going to follow right behind the Sun, and it will again start to put emphasis through the end of the month into December on being as honest as possible with ourselves, and then being as honest as possible with others. This Mercury retrograde started at 6 degrees Sag, back to 21 Scorpio, rounding the numbers. Mercury retrograde started at about 7 Sag, back to 21 Scorpio. Mercury's going to be in Sagittarius 41 days. So as it goes direct, the end of November, then goes back into Sag while the Sun and Venus are in Sagittarius. These are deep honesty times. So how is it happening for you personally in your communications with others in general, specifically with intimacy? And how do we see it unfolding on a collective level? More lies? Sagittarius can be a fantastic storyteller and really move into the con games, or it can be bluntly direct with honesty and fact. The more you can be honest with yourself and others, the less you have to remember the lie you told. Mercury is going to go stationary direct. We spoke on this the last podcast. Mercury went retrograde with Jupiter turning retrograde. Mercury's going to go direct with Saturn turning stationary direct, finishing up its 4-month retrograde cycle. Saturn turns stationary direct November 27th, Thanksgiving Day for those of us in the U.S., 25 degrees Pisces. Mercury is going to go stationary direct November 29th at just shy of 21 degrees Scorpio. 2 big aha moments for reality. How are we grounding ourselves? How are we emotionally grounding and stabilizing ourselves so that we can go forward as strongly as possible? And I would say that as Saturn and Mercury go stationary direct in Scorpio, reflect back to their polarity, Taurus. How well have you developed your inner security through Mercury retrograde? How well have you developed your inner self-reliance? I rely on myself to meet all my needs, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's what we're being asked as these two planets start moving forward again and bringing us evolution. Just so happens on the day Mercury turns stationary direct, that's when Venus will make its opposition to Saturn at 29 Scorpio. Venus makes its opposition to Uranus. Venus at 29 Scorpio, Uranus retrograde at 29 Taurus. So if there's been some emotional issues, some intimacy issues that have been going on through this Mercury retrograde and we haven't been addressing them, we could see end of November. The U.S., we could see that Thanksgiving weekend really bring eruptions to the surface, opportunities to the surface. Mercury direct, Saturn direct, Venus opposing Uranus. Big aha time period. So, as your own intuition brings anything up for you, address it as best as you can. And then Venus going into Sagittarius November 30th through December 24th. Honesty with yourself. What is important to me, Venus? What do I value? And how do I value truth with myself and others? How do I speak it? How do I walk my talk? It will minimize the famous Scorpio confrontations and upsets as best as possible. Okay, well, Monk, he's so good at listening. He's so good at just letting me rattle through. But he's also just, scrambling notes as Star Lady rattles things off. So.
Yep, I got a full page.
All righty. Well, I know Canadians celebrate Thanksgiving early November. I don't know if your date is stationary or moves. We celebrated the last Thursday in November in the U.S., and I wish all of you everything in your world to be thankful for and to be grateful for. And I wish peace to all people on planet Earth. All right, on behalf of Media Monk, thanks for listening, everyone.
Aho.